A pair of immaculate leather dress shoes, polished to a mirror shine, stopped inches from his face. Julian kept his head bowed, the plush fibers of the expensive rug pressing into his knees. He could feel the man's gaze on him, heavy and dissecting. The silence stretched, thick with years of unspoken history. The boy he had once tormented, the quiet political hostage from the Sterling Empire, was now the sovereign, a man whose power was absolute. Julian wondered if this was the moment his life would end. The sovereign, Alexander Sterling, finally spoke, his voice a low timbre that vibrated through the floor. He asked why Julian was shaking. Julian flinched. He hadn't realized it was so obvious. If he were chosen for Alexander's personal staff, he couldn't imagine the tortures that awaited him. A frantic prayer formed in his mind, a desperate mantra not to be chosen. The words tumbled from his lips in a faint whisper. A ghost of a smile touched Alexander's lips. He reached down, his fingers gripping Julian's chin, forcing his head up. The pressure was intense, clear. He mused aloud whether someone like Julian, a dissipated wreck who couldn't even kneel properly, was fit to serve him. The sarcasm was a physical thing, sharp and cutting. Julian could only endure it. He knew that the years of humiliation he'd inflicted on Alexander would not be forgotten. He managed to stammer out an apology, acknowledging his own unworthiness. Alexander released him with a cold snort, the dismissal clear. An aide inquired if the sovereign had made a selection from the tribute of attendants sent by the fallen Republic of Viridia. A wave of relief washed over Julian. Alexander's disdain was his shield. Any fate, even cleaning the stables, was better than being near the man he had wronged so deeply. Alexander waved a hand, signaling for the next group to be brought in, but then paused. His voice cut through the air, halting everyone. He reached out and tipped Julian's chin up again, his eyes locking onto Julian's. He announced that this was the one he wanted. Julian's relief curdled into ice. Alexander leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur as he listed the duties of a personal attendant. Dressing the sovereign, assisting with his bath, and warming his bed. The world tilted on its axis for Julian. There would be no escape. That evening, he was led to the sovereign's private wing. The air was thick with tension. Alexander's breathing was audible, slightly ragged, as Julian fumbled with the complex buttons of his formal jacket. Julian wanted to weep with frustration. He had been a prince, accustomed to a team of valets. He had no experience in serving anyone. Giving up, he let his hands fall to his sides, declaring his incompetence and inviting Alexander to execute him. Alexander took a deep, steadying breath and undid the fastenings himself. As the tailored fabric fell away, it revealed a physique honed by discipline, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, the defined lines of his abdomen stark in the low light. Alexander's lips twisted into a smirk, and he taunted Julian, asking if he should remove his trousers as well. Julian quickly averted his eyes. The history between them was a tangled knot. Julian's father, the former president of Viridia, had been a corrupt man with a taste for young men. After witnessing a particularly sordid scene, Julian had returned to his own quarters and looked at the then hostage, Alexander, with his stoic, handsome face. A perverse idea had taken root, to shatter that composure, to dominate him. The attempt had backfired spectacularly, with Julian finding himself the one pinned against a desk. Alexander's voice, cold and sharp, broke through the memory. He sneered, asking if this was Julian's grand plan, to become his lover. He questioned what could possibly make Julian think he was still interested. The chill in his voice was utterly convincing. Yet Julian could hear the frantic, betraying rhythm of Alexander's heart. An idea sparked in Julian's mind. If submission didn't work, perhaps revulsion would. He feigned a stumble, lurching toward Alexander's chest. The plan was to disgust him, to remind him of the forced intimacy of the past. It was a miscalculation. As he fell against him, he felt the unmistakable evidence of Alexander's arousal. Alexander shoved him away as if burned, his face a mask of fury as he questioned Julian's shamelessness. Julian shrugged, leaning into the persona he had cultivated for years. He reminded Alexander that he had always been a hedonist, a wastrel. Alexander's breathing grew heavy, the disgust in his eyes intensifying. Julian saw his chance and pushed further, suggesting that if the sovereign wasn't interested, perhaps his personal guard might be. A vein throbbed in Alexander's temple. In a swift, brutal movement, he seized Julian and threw him onto the massive bed. He demanded to know what game Julian was playing. This was not how he had imagined it. As he struggled, a pained cry escaped him. Alexander's body was a dead weight, one hand locking his waist in place, the other pinning his arms. He snarled that Julian had initiated this, questioning his sudden pretense of innocence. Julian wanted to scream that it was all a ploy to make him leave. He suspected the years of abuse had twisted something inside Alexander. The sovereign hissed at him to be still. Julian protested that he was only trying to kick him off. Alexander's voice was low and final, stating that even if Julian offered himself, he would never be allowed to leave. Realizing the futility of arguing with a man so clearly enraged, Julian tried to explain his true intentions. After a tense silence, Alexander sat up, adjusting his disheveled clothes. His expression was even stormier than before. He ordered Julian to get out. It was exactly what Julian wanted. He bowed quickly and retreated toward the door, thanking the sovereign. His swift escape seemed only to infuriate Alexander further. He was commanded to halt, his voice laced with menace. Alexander asked if he truly thought he could show such disrespect without consequence. Julian was confused, pointing out that Alexander himself had ordered him to leave. The flush on Alexander's face deepened with rage, and a fresh wave of fear washed over Julian. The sovereign held the power of life and death. He braced himself for a beating, for punishment, for being dragged to the security cells. Instead, Alexander's punishment was bizarre. He ordered Julian to go out and eat the dinner that had been prepared, forbidding him from returning until he had finished it. A young attendant led him to an adjoining dining room. A lavish spread covered the table, but only one dish, a prime rib roast, showed any sign of being touched. It was Julian's favorite. As he sat, his stomach rumbled loudly, and he realized it had been doing so in Alexander's presence as well. An old servant nearby murmured that the sovereign had been in the kitchen early that morning, and they had all assumed the meal was for some favored guest, not a new attendant. Julian's fork paused mid-air. A memory surfaced. Years ago, when he was still a prince, his mother's influence had made him a target for his siblings. Alexander, then his companion, had been tasked with tasting his food. One morning, Alexander had tasted a bowl of soup, then suddenly collapsed. He had been unconscious for 3 days, the doctors later confirming the soup had been laced with a potent toxin. From that day forward, every meal Julian ate was prepared by Alexander's own hands. A sudden chill ran down his spine as a hand clamped down on the back of his neck. Alexander had entered the room silently. He leaned over Julian's shoulder, his voice a low whisper, asking if the food was good. On impulse, Julian blurted out that it wasn't as good as him. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. He was unceremoniously hauled back to the bedroom and tossed onto the silk covers. He tried to explain it was a misunderstanding, but Alexander was beyond listening. He gripped Julian's wrists, pinning them above his head. His eyes were shadowed with pain as he demanded to know why Julian was provoking him now, after kicking him out of his life all those years ago. The memory was sharp and painful. After the poisoning incident, Julian had confronted his mother, forcing her to arrange for Alexander's return to the Sterling Empire. He couldn't bear the thought of Alexander dying because of him. Before leaving, a tearful Alexander had clung to his sleeve, reminding Julian that he had said he liked him. Julian, surrounded by his sycophants, had laughed cruelly, calling Alexander a mere plaything he had grown tired of. The devastation in Alexander's eyes had been absolute. Looking at him now, Julian was swamped with guilt. He asked softly if Alexander would believe that he regretted it. A bitter smile touched Alexander's lips as he questioned if he was a dog, to be discarded and then summoned back with a whistle. Julian fell silent. He then noticed Alexander's hands moving to his belt and asked what he was doing. Alexander's response was rough as he tore the belt free. He was going to teach him a lesson, and he would have to endure the pain. After that night, Julian was officially assigned as Alexander's personal attendant, tasked with menial duties like cleaning his fountain pens and organizing his desk. The revenge continued, but in peculiar ways. Alexander, a master of calligraphy, would work for hours on state documents. He would often work with his shirt unbuttoned, and he had a habit of leaning so close that Julian could feel the heat radiating from his body. The 108th time this happened, Julian lost his patience and stepped back just as Alexander leaned in. The sovereign nearly fell, catching himself on the edge of the desk. He glared at Julian, his eyes blazing with indignation, before slamming his pen down and demanding if this was how Julian intended to serve him. Julian winced, admitting that he was in pain. After standing for most of the day while Alexander worked, his legs and back were aching. The fire in Alexander's eyes immediately softened, replaced by a flicker of concern. He asked where it hurt. Julian, forgetting his decorum, bent over to rub his calves and lower back. Alexander put down his work and started towards him, offering to massage the sore muscles. The sight of those strong, capable hands sent a jolt of alarm through Julian. He scrambled back, pleading for Alexander to stay away, the memory of his recent lesson still painfully fresh. The light in Alexander's eyes dimmed. The strange retribution was not over. Hoping to steer Alexander towards a more conventional romantic life and spare his own body, Julian started leaving romance novels on his desk. The plan backfired when Alexander, after reading one, summoned him to the bathroom to assist with his bath. Julian had just added salts to the steaming water when a warm body pressed against him from behind. Alexander's voice was a low murmur against his ear, asking for help with his clothes. Julian turned, his eyes sweeping over Alexander's already bare torso. He pointed out the obvious flaw in the request. He had to admit, Alexander's physique was impressive. He was taller than Julian with a powerful, lean build. As Alexander leaned closer, his chest brushing against Julian's, he asked again if it wasn't his duty to attend him. Julian was certain now that the past had warped him. Alexander noticed his gaze lingering on his stomach and asked, a smirk playing on his lips, if he liked what he saw, offering to let him touch. Julian, thinking he might as well, reached out. The skin was smooth and warm, the muscles beneath firm. A deep satisfaction grew in Alexander's eyes. The steam filled the room, creating an intimate, hazy atmosphere. By the time Julian realized what was happening, Alexander's face was inches from his intent to kiss him clear. In a surge of panic, Julian shoved him hard, sending him splashing into the large tub. Alexander emerged sputtering and choking, looking like a drowned dog. He glared at Julian, his voice tight with fury, and asked if he truly despised him that much. Julian nodded, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. It had been 5 years, yet the man still had this profound effect on him. The next day, Alexander was sick. An attendant named Ryan reported that the sovereign had spent the night on the terrace playing a mournful tune on his flute after his bath. Ryan added that the music sounded like a lover's lament. Julian nodded grimly, wondering who the lover could be. Ryan then delivered the summons. Julian was to attend to the sovereign in his sickbed. It was a task usually reserved for a consort, but Alexander had none. He found Alexander propped against pillows, looking pale, his lips tinged with blue. He spoke with a congested voice, complaining of a pain in his chest and asking Julian to rub it. Instead, Julian felt for his pulse. Though he had been an idle prince, his mother had insisted he study basic medicine. Observing Alexander's complexion and weak pulse, his brow furrowed. He slowly drew a handkerchief from his pocket and covered his own face. He informed the room that, in his opinion, the sovereign was suffering from a severe contagion and needed to be quarantined. He gave a meaningful look to the staff, who quickly began to file out of the room. A sharp crack echoed from the bed. Alexander had gripped the bedpost so tightly the wood had splintered. He looked at Julian with red-rimmed eyes, his voice cracking as he asked if Julian was truly going to abandon him there alone. Julian tried to reason with him, explaining the risk of an outbreak, but stopped when he saw tears welling in Alexander's eyes. A sigh escaped him. He dismissed the remaining staff and, picking up the bowl of medicine, brought the spoon to Alexander's lips. Alexander refused to drink. Exasperated, Julian felt more like he was dealing with a petulant child than a ruler. When he finally got some of the liquid into Alexander's mouth, it dribbled down his chin. Julian reached out instinctively to wipe it away, but as his hand touched Alexander's jaw, he felt the wetness of Alexander's tongue licking his fingers. Revulsion and shock shot through him. He pried Alexander's jaw open and poured the rest of the medicine down his throat, causing him to cough and choke violently. He advised the sovereign to take his medicine and get better. After Alexander recovered, he was occupied for several days with his military advisors. Julian used the respite. One night, he slipped out of the staff quarters and met a loyalist guard in a secluded corner of the estate grounds. He handed over an encrypted data chip. He told the guard to deliver the intel to their commander and return in 3 days. The guard confirmed the instructions and asked Julian a question. Julian nodded and asked if the guard had brought him the item. The guard's expression was grave. He stated that, per their commander's orders, the item could only be given to Julian after the Sterling Empire had fallen. Julian clenched his fists and walked away. He was a prince of Viridia. His approach to Alexander had been calculated from the start. After Viridia fell, his father sent him and other disgraced nobles as servants to the Sterling Empire with a single mission: to gather intelligence for a counterattack. Soon, news arrived that Alexander was leading an expedition to quash the last remnants of Viridian resistance, who were holed up in the mountains. His own father was among them. Julian learned the news from a senior staff member and, turning away, clenched his fists until his knuckles were white. A month later, Alexander returned. That night, Julian crept through the darkened corridors to the sovereign's wing and slipped through an open window. He had barely landed on the carpet when the cold steel of a sword was pressed against his neck. Alexander, still half asleep, blinked in confusion. When he recognized Julian's face, his first instinct was to lean in for a kiss. The familiar scent of pine and cold air enveloped Julian. But a second before their lips met, Alexander jerked back, fully awake. He demanded to know what Julian was doing there. The harshness in his tone set Julian on edge. Before he could answer, he noticed papers scattered across Alexander's bed, sketches of a man's face. Alexander quickly gathered them up and shoved them under the mattress. Julian tried to sound nonchalant, teasing Alexander about being shy, but a strange unease settled in his stomach. He asked what Alexander was trying to hide. Alexander's face was a stony mask. He repeated his question, his voice dangerously low. Julian, desperate for information about the military campaign, decided on a reckless course of action. He wrapped his arms around Alexander's neck, murmuring that he just wanted to sleep with him. For a moment, Alexander froze, but his shock quickly morphed into a towering rage. He slammed Julian against the wall, his hand closing around his throat. He asked if it was amusing to play with him like this, to offer himself now after rejecting his every touch. He reminded Julian of his past cruelty, his absolute refusal to reciprocate Alexander's feelings. Julian countered, asking why, if he despised him so much, he still protected him. Alexander stiffened, realizing that in his anger, he had unconsciously cushioned the back of Julian's head with his own hand before it hit the wall. Julian pulled him closer by his shirt and kissed him. The world dissolved into a blur of motion as Alexander lifted him and carried him to the bed. It was a desperate, almost violent encounter. Later, as Alexander prepared for a second round, Julian stopped him. He had to know. He asked who the man in the drawings was. Though he hadn't seen them clearly, he could tell it was a handsome man, and a sharp pang of jealousy hit him. Had Alexander found someone else in the years they were apart? Alexander paused, his voice flat as he stated that it was not him. The words, though expected, were a sharp blow. He continued, his tone turning bitter, asking why Julian cared. He accused Julian of seducing him only to secure a more comfortable life than that of a common attendant. The accusation struck home. Julian's own temper flared. He retorted that if he was selling himself for a better life, it didn't matter who the buyer was. He told Alexander not to think he was special. It could have been anyone. Alexander's eyes went dark, and the kiss that followed was punishing. He was clearly exhausted from his campaign and fell into a deep sleep after their second encounter. The air between them was poisoned. They didn't speak for days, but Julian was too preoccupied to care. His plan had gone awry. 3 days passed, and the guard never returned. Panic set in. If his contact had been intercepted, his mission and what was left of Viridia was doomed. Steeling himself, he entered Alexander's private study. The sight that greeted him made the blood drain from his face. There, on the polished mahogany desk, was the encrypted data chip he had given the guard. He couldn't speak. Alexander knew. How long had he known? Alexander's fingers were pressed against the chip, his knuckles white. A cruel smile spread across his face. He revealed that he had known from the beginning. The entire tribute of attendants from Viridia had been a trap. The intelligence Julian had passed on was false, carefully fabricated to lead his father's forces into an ambush. He informed Julian that his father was likely already dead. Julian could only ask why. Alexander's reply was a steel needle to the heart. He had enjoyed watching Julian offer himself up. That was all. It was all for revenge, to settle the score for his past humiliation. It had all been an act. Julian slapped him. He demanded to know how he could claim it was just revenge when Alexander had taken advantage of him for years. Alexander touched the red mark on his cheek, his smile never reaching his eyes. He said that sleeping with someone like Julian had only made him feel dirty. The words shattered something inside Julian. He couldn't breathe. Alexander told him he was no longer of any use. He could stay or go, it made no difference. Their fragile connection was irrevocably broken. Julian began plotting his escape. He bribed the head of palace procurement with a pouch of silver. The plan was set. In 5 days, he would be smuggled out with a supply convoy. But on the 5th day, he was dragged from his bed at dawn. The sovereign was sick again and had summoned him. It was the second time in less than a month. Julian sensed something was deeply wrong. He found Alexander delirious with fever. Alexander pinned him to the bed, his grip like iron, kissing him feverishly. In the struggle, a box fell from the bedside table, spilling its contents across the floor. Julian's breath caught in his throat. It was the sketches. Dozens of them, some new, some on yellowed, aged paper. Every single one was of him. It made no sense. Alexander had said he hated him. He grabbed Alexander by the shoulders, demanding to know what was truly wrong with him. But Alexander was lost in his fever dream. A warm drop hit Julian's chest, then another. It was blood, trickling from the corner of Alexander's mouth. This was no simple illness. The symptoms resembled a rare form of poisoning. Julian screamed for the physician. Alexander held him tighter, babbling incoherently. He said it was just a fever, that he wouldn't let Julian go. He said if he left, his family would hurt him again. He rambled about how cruel Julian's father and brothers were, and how he would kill them all for Julian. The words hit Julian like a physical blow. Of course, he wanted his father dead. The man was a monster who had publicly executed his mother for daring to protest his depraved tastes. But there were reasons, complications. He couldn't let the old man die yet. Alexander passed out, his weight a heavy burden. There was something he was hiding. After forcing more medicine down Alexander's throat, Julian sought answers. He found Alexander's childhood nanny. The old woman was tight-lipped until Julian told her his name. Her eyes widened. She pulled him aside, her voice a hushed, urgent whisper. She told him the sovereign was dying, and that the state council was already being told to prepare for the succession. He was only 23. The nanny recounted the story. As a young prince, Alexander had been sent to Viridia as a political pawn. When he returned, he was a different person, obsessed with destroying the Viridian president. He claimed the person he loved was there and was being mistreated. After seizing power, he began coughing up blood. The official story was an old war wound, but the staff knew the truth. He had been afflicted with something in Viridia, a slow-acting poison that caused burning pain and sleepless nights. Viridia. Poison. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Julian touched his face and found it wet with tears. He ran back to the bedroom and shook the sleeping sovereign awake. He demanded to know what was in the soup he had drunk for him all those years ago. Alexander, seeing the truth in Julian's eyes, finally confessed. He offered a faint, weak smile. It was better that he drank it than Julian. His father's words from before he left for the Sterling Empire came back to him. The president had told him to spy on Alexander, that if he disobeyed, a poison placed in his food years ago would activate. The soup Alexander had drunk hadn't contained a simple toxin. It had been the deadly, slow-acting poison meant for him. A wave of red-hot anger and heartbreaking tenderness washed over him. He wanted to hit him, to hold him. He called Alexander a fool. Alexander whispered that he was the one responsible for the fall of Julian's country, that he never anticipated Julian's father would have him castrated and sent as a slave. He admitted he knew about the escape plan, and that if Julian still wished to leave, he would provide an escort to his father's camp. Julian stared at him. He asked if he was finished. Alexander nodded weakly. Julian pushed him back against the pillows and crushed his lips against his. A kiss full of desperation and fury. He told Alexander that he was staying. He was not going anywhere. Alexander was stunned, unable to process his words. Julian shrugged. He was just a hedonistic prince, easily manipulated by men like Alexander and his father. Alexander's expression darkened, and he started to apologize. Julian cut him off. He strode to the desk, grabbed a tactical map of the Viridian Mountain territories, and threw it on the bed. He told him that apologies were useless. He wanted action. His finger jabbed at a location on the map, the last known position of his father's stronghold. Alexander's eyes widened. Julian looked at him, his voice steady. He asked Alexander to help him get his revenge. Of course, Alexander agreed. He had never been able to deny Julian anything. In early spring, the Sterling armies returned victorious. The last vestiges of Viridian power had been crushed, its leader captured. Julian stood beside Alexander as the prison carriage passed. Inside the cage, his father, once immaculate in his presidential suits, was now a filthy wreck in rags. His eyes found Julian's. He lunged at the bars, his face contorted in a mask of madness, screaming that Julian was a traitor, a disgrace to his mother's memory. The man who had laughed while his wife was beheaded dared to speak her name. Julian smiled, a cold, sharp thing. He leaned over and kissed Alexander deeply, right there in front of the entire court. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Alexander's eyes flew open in shock before he wrapped his arms tightly around Julian's waist, pulling him closer. His father made a choking sound. The last word he uttered was "you" before he collapsed. The royal physician pronounced him dead from a massive stroke. Before Julian could even process his victory, Alexander staggered, a spray of dark blood erupting from his lips. The court descended into chaos. Julian caught Alexander as he fell, his fingers frantically searching for a pulse. The old poison was running its course. The physician's verdict was grim. The toxin was now systemic. Alexander had 3 months to live at most. Julian finally understood. Alexander had brought him to the palace for one last chance to see him, but had planned to push him away before the end, to spare him the pain of watching him die. The Viridian poison had no known cure. For 3 days, Julian sat by Alexander's bedside, surrounded by medical texts, searching for a solution that didn't exist. He was pulled from his vigil by the Prime Minister, who presented him with an imperial decree. In the event of the sovereign's incapacitation, Julian was to act as regent. He, a disgraced former prince, now held the reins of an empire. He was the only one with the intricate knowledge of Viridia's tribal factions needed to stabilize the newly conquered territories. After securing several key victories, he left the army camp and rode back to the old Viridian presidential palace. It was a ghost town. He walked through the halls of his former home, memories assaulting him at every turn. He remembered making Alexander kneel on the cold stone steps in winter so he could use his back as a mounting block to get on his horse. He remembered forcing Alexander to forge his handwriting on tedious reports. He remembered demanding Alexander help him change out of his sweaty athletic gear. But the memories shifted. The forced servitude had slowly become genuine care. Alexander carrying him onto the horse. Alexander tutoring him, Alexander choosing his clothes each day. Without realizing it, Alexander had quietly taken control of every aspect of his life. If he died, Julian didn't know how he would go on. On the road back to the military camp, he passed a spiritual landmark, a sacred mountain retreat. An old memory surfaced. As a boy, he had broken out in a severe rash that baffled the doctors. They had given him only days to live. Then, miraculously, he had recovered. He later noticed 2 deep scars on Alexander's knees. His valet had told him that Alexander had gone to the sacred mountain and prayed for him, making the entire pilgrimage from the base to the summit on his knees to plead for a cure. Julian dismounted. He knelt on the hard stone path. Pain shot through his knees, but he ignored it. Step by step, he began his own ascent, praying for Alexander's life. There are no gods, but there are good people. After leading the army back to the capital in triumph, Julian was in the sick room when a woman dressed in simple white robes burst in, demanding to know who was Julian and who was Alexander. Julian identified himself and the unconscious sovereign. Without preamble, the woman thrust a small wooden box into his hand. She explained that it was the antidote. Her master, the healer of the mountain retreat, had been moved by the sight of a man making the arduous pilgrimage on his knees. The master had found his sincerity profound and sent her with the only known cure. It turned out that the very same reclusive mountain community was where his father had originally procured the poison. Alexander, barely conscious, rasped a question about Viridia only having one mountain. Julian told him to shut up and drink the medicine. He stayed by Alexander's bedside all night, terrified the antidote itself might be toxic. Alexander's gaze drifted down to Julian's legs. Julian tried to hide his knees, but it was too late. Alexander's brow furrowed as he asked about the thick bandages. Caught, Julian abandoned all pretense and collapsed into his arms, confessing that he had knelt all the way to the summit for him, and that it hurt terribly. Alexander's breathing hitched, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He whispered that he wasn't worth such a sacrifice. Julian teased him for his persistent self-deprecation and asked how he intended to repay him. Alexander took a deep breath, his expression solemn. He offered to give him half the empire. Julian shook his head. Alexander then offered him all of it. Julian silenced him, pressing his lips close to his. He murmured that he was useless at ruling. He didn't want an empire. Alexander's voice was thick with emotion. Then what do you want? I want you, healthy, and always loving me. Alexander closed the small distance between them and kissed him. Done.